Hello and welcome to Caldwell County Today. I'm Paige Counts, Public Information Officer for Caldwell County, and today I have joining me Lee Cox. Lee is Master Gardener and Fair Board member. I think I said that.
No, I'm a volunteer.
She's a volunteer with the fair, the agricultural fair. So today we're going to talk a little bit about gardening and the agricultural fair coming up in September. And I realize that's a long time from now. It may seem like a long time, but it will be here soon.
It will. The fair dates are September the 16th through the 19th, which is a Wednesday through a Saturday this year. And hopefully that is something we can really look forward to after all of this COVID mess is hopefully behind us, or mostly behind us. As I have mentioned before, this is the fair book from last year. Most of it is about the exhibit hall and what would be entered in the exhibit hall. So I can briefly go over that. We have photography. We have crafts. There is field crops such as corn and cane crops, that sort of thing. We have the horticulture, which are the vegetables. We have flowers. We have eggs, conserved things, the canned goods, and we have culinary. I'm sure a whole bunch of you out there surely are really good cooks. And if you're not, you're probably learning more about that now. I know I am. But this is something that hopefully we can look forward to. And please be thinking about that as you are thinking about what to do now and this summer. Another thing that I brought is this book, the Extension Gardener Handbook. As Paige mentioned, I am a master gardener and have done both veggie gardening and the flower gardening. With the economic impact that the COVID is having on us, there are going to be a lot of people who are thinking more about feeding themselves. I would encourage you also to think about helping to feed others, because there is a lot of unemployment. It's the lowest, from what I read, that it has been since the Great Depression in the 30s. So there are many people who are going to need food. I would encourage you to please think about planting some extra so that you can take some to the soup kitchen, to Christian ministries, to whoever might be willing to give out food, because people are going to be needing that. In planting about gardens, let's talk about what that takes. And there's more than one way to have a garden and to have fresh food. The way we think about it usually is in the soil. The other ways are in containers and also in straw bales. Don't just go to Lowe's and get straw bales and start planting. It takes a little bit extra to do that. For one thing, you have to put a little fertilizer in a straw bale and usually a little bit of garden soil or potting mix or something to help the roots grow with that. And you have to water it a lot. But straw bale is certainly one way to do that. Container is another one. If you do container gardening, look at some of the dwarf varieties of things, the small tomatoes, small peppers, small blueberry bushes, but something that can easily be grown in a container and be happy there. Soil is our basic for any of the gardening. Compost is our friend, a really, really good friend. So if you were thinking about a garden, think about putting some compost and tilling that in so that your soil will have what it needs. A lot of times it really doesn't need a whole lot of fertilizer. Sometimes it just needs the compost to start all of the little rhizomes, the little in what the soil is composed of, to help your veggies grow. Now is a good time also, and it is free, to do a soil test. Those tests are available at Cooperative Extension, which is at 120 Hospital Avenue. Basically, it's the basement of the library, and you probably need to call beforehand because I think county offices are all basically closed unless you have an appointment there. But you can do the soil test to find out how much nitrogen or potassium or phosphorus or zinc or you name it that your soil needs, and you can get a return from the state on the computer about what your soil needs so that you will know exactly what to put in it and what not to put in it. Your soil is your basic for planting anything, and especially vegetables. Another thing to consider too is rotation planting. You do not want to plant tomatoes constantly in one spot. Think about rotation. Think also about plant families, because when you're thinking about plant families as well, tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants are in the same family. So if you had tomatoes here, you don't want to put peppers here the next year. You want to put somewhere else. So look at your rotation, look at your plant families. Also look at the dates when is a good planting time, and the germination rate, and the time from planting to germination when that little plant starts peaking up and starts having leaves on it, and the time to maturity when you can pick what you're planting. You can plant seeds. You can also go to a hardware store or a big box store and buy small plants that you can plant. Either one is fine. If you do that, you need to know when to plant, when to put them in the ground. There are several pages in this book that tell us when we can plant certain things. The purple on here is the mountains, so that is what I will refer to. Let's take asparagus, for instance. March and April is a good time to plant asparagus, which of course is a perennial and probably will take 2 to 3 years to be able to get a good crop of that. Basil, a good time to start planting that is mid-May, because you generally do seeds with basil. Lima beans, 1st of May. And by the way, April the 20th is generally the last frost date for this area. So if you plant before then, be aware also of what is frost proof and what will be killed, like tomatoes, for instance, if it gets a really hard frost. Bush beans, or the snap or the pole beans, they could be planted around the 1st of March. on up until July. Excuse me. Beets can be planted now. Broccoli can be planted now. Brussels sprouts is a cold crop, and it likes cold weather, so it, along with cabbage, really should be planted in the fall. Okay, let's see what else we generally plant around here. Carrots. Realize that this is a really root crop, so I mentioned straw bale gardening. Straw bales are pretty good for carrots. Anything with some sandy soil, something other than this really hard red clay that we've got here, would be good for carrots because they want to go down. Collard greens. Collard greens can be planted around the 1st of April. They also are a crop that doesn't really mind a whole lot of cold weather, so they can be planted on up until August or later. Sweet corn wants warm soil, so it maybe would be better planted around the 1st of May or later. Cucumbers. And cucumbers are really easy to plant from seed, and that is another one that should be planted around mid-May. Dill. Dill is, of course, a good spice, but it is also a crop that butterflies really like. I went out one day on one of my dill plants and it was almost gone, and there were these caterpillars, these yellow with black striped caterpillars just munching away, and I thought, eat up, you're going to be a butterfly. But dill is something that you can plant now. Eggplant, mid-May. Garlic. Garlic is a fall crop, so it doesn't need to be planted really before the 1st of September. Leeks could be planted now. Lettuce, I think a lot of you know that lettuce really doesn't like hot weather. It can be planted now and again beginning in August. I have had success with lettuce in the summertime planting it in shade, so that if it got maybe a few hours of morning sun and then afternoon shade, I could get a salad still. Cantaloupes should be planted mid-May, as should watermelon. Mustard, okra. Now, okra is one to plant mid-May as well. Let's see what a lot of these. Parsley. Parsley can be planted now. Peas. Peas really should have been planted in February because they are something that likes cold weather. However, the field peas are good to be planted around the 1st of May. Irish potatoes can be planted in March. Sweet potatoes, this says June is a good time to start planting sweet potatoes. Pumpkins, now that would be a good one also for the agricultural fair. And they, excuse me, they could be planted mid-May. Spinach should be planted in early spring. Summer squash and winter squash also mid-May. Tomatoes, I wouldn't plant them. I wouldn't plant them now, but sometime after May the 1st would be good.
Now, is that the tomato seed or the tomato plant?
Tomato seed could be started indoors at almost any time, but to put it in the ground, I wouldn't plant it before May 1st. And remember too, if you start something on the inside, which is a good way to start your seeds, that it does need to be hardened off, which means inside and then outside, back inside. Outside, longer, back inside. So, you gradually increase the time that it spends outside so that when you actually put it in the soil, it's okay.
It's ready for that.
It's ready.
It's kind of like we are. As spring comes, we spend a little more time outside.
Oh, yes.
We kind of warm up to that.
We do.
So it's the same thing with tomatoes. You talked about container gardens. What grows well in a container garden?
The thing that first of all comes to my mind are the small tomatoes, the ones you can pick off and pop in your mouth or use in a salad. And there are bush varieties of tomatoes. Just look on the label. But if it's something like Burpee's Big Boys,
right?
Unless you have got a really good support for that, I don't think I'd plant that in a container.
If someone's doing a garden for the very first time, what do you recommend they start with? To have, I know it's a lot of work, regardless.
Oh, they are, yes.
But are there some things that maybe are a little easier to start with than others?
Tomatoes, probably. Green beans, there are a lot of bugs that like green bean leaves. Bell peppers, which of course are in the same family as tomatoes. And I wanted to say something about planting tomatoes too. Here's your tomato plant. When you go to plant a tomato, what you want to do is plant it horizontally. You go and leave the stem so that it's got maybe two sets of leaves. Take off the other leaves, and when you plant, put some Epsom salt in the bottom, stir that in good, put a layer of dirt, put your tomato plant and cover it up. What that does is that the tomato plants then grow roots so that this is sturdier, because you can have some pretty big tomatoes, in which case you don't want that to happen. But that's really what happens. What's the best way? The Epsom salt also helps with blossom end rot, because that is caused not only by inconsistent watering, but a lack of calcium in the soil. Same thing is true of tomato plants. Bell peppers, the pepper plants.
If people have questions about gardening, what resources do you recommend?
Cooperative Extension. And their telephone number is 828-757-1290. And there is a director there, a horticultural agent, Sarah Christus, and I think Alan Caldwell, who used to be the director there and who taught me master gardening, is there part-time.
And they really are a great resource.
Fantastic.
And can answer any question you come up with. If they don't know the answer, they will find the answer.
They will.
And I notice on Miss Cox's book, it says North Carolina State Cooperative Extension. So they also have quite an extensive website.
They do. And they can tell you how to access that, and would be more than happy to do that. I would also recommend the Master Gardener program, which like a lot of things, I'm sure had to come to a screeching halt this spring, but it usually starts in February and goes until mid-May. It is an extremely good program for anyone who wants to learn more about gardening, whether it is veggie gardening, plants, trees, shrubs, what have you.
Give us a...
There's one other thing I wanted to mention too, as far as gardening is concerned. Mulch, in addition to compost, is our friend. I use a lot of soaker hoses in my garden, and we'll put, you can put straw, newspaper, shredded leaves over that. But if you put it thick enough, what that does is it helps keep the weeds down, which helps your back and helps the time you have to spend in weeding, or hopefully not weeding there.
Yes.
So.
And I think, I don't know what my last question was, but I would be, I need to mention the library has a seed library.
They do.
And even during the time of COVID, they have curbside pickup, and seeds are available through their curbside pickup. So we want to make sure that you know that. You can go to the library's website, see what seeds are available, and they will have those ready for you to pick up. So that is a good way to get started with seeds. And I understand they have several heirloom seeds there, so that is a good option for folks.
It is. I'm an organic gardener. I highly recommend that, because that way you do not ingest some of the chemicals, many of which are not really healthy for us. And there is a chapter in here on organic gardening. So, you know, I would again encourage use of organics. That again is where compost and mulch come in. Mm-hmm. And that, because they are very helpful. Eventually the mulch will deteriorate into compost and can be tilled into or otherwise ground into the soil to help increase the soil and the richness and the productiveness of the soil.
And there are a lot of, I don't know if it's a lot, but some folks do compost, saving
kitchen scraps.
Kitchen scraps. I was looking for the right word.
Grass
clippings, and you may see in my parents' case, it's a huge black composting bin that they have to, you know, use on their gardens, and they do that year round, so that compost is ready.
Let me mention about composting. Mm-hmm. You can compost a whole lot of things. Some things that should not be in the compost pile are any kind of meat, fat, bones, diseased plants of any sort. But leaves, grass clippings, weeds, and you have to have it up to, I think it's 120 degrees to kill the weed seeds, because you don't want to be composting and having the weed seeds come up again.
No, you know, you want to get rid of those.
Yes. So, but you know, composting is easy. You do want it away from your house because it does smell some.
Yeah, you don't want that really close to the house, I will say that.
Yes. But, you know, I mean, if you compost your kitchen scraps, you're again helping yourself. You mentioned something earlier that I'd like to reiterate too, and that is about kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And if we can get our kids doing some gardening, then we're helping them become more self-sufficient. We are helping them learn where our food comes from, not necessarily cans. What precedes the cans, people? You know, but we're, I think, giving them a sense of self-satisfaction if they can see putting a seed in the ground and then this plant coming up and they're taking care of it and it produces something that they can eat or smells good, then we are incredibly helping our children. Even little kids can learn to do that. Another thing is you don't have to have solely a veggie garden, because what you want are pollinators. 1/3 of every mouthful that we eat we get because of pollinators. We always think about honeybees for that, but it's not just the honeybees. We have a whole bunch of native bees, like mason bees, even wasps, hornets, much as we don't like them. But they are pollinators, so are butterflies, so are moths. So, we need to have, in with our veggies, we need to have some plants that these little pollinators love to have. And in getting nectar from the plants, they will also pollinate our garden. Squash is a great example of that. Squash needs to be pollinated before it produces, because the male blossoms come before the female blossoms do on the squash plants.
So there are a lot of lessons there and good ways to keep probably some overactive kids or some kids who maybe have spent too much time in front of a video game active.
Exactly.
Doing something productive. And with containers and all the options, you don't have to have a lot of space necessarily.
You don't.
So there are a lot of options. And I was thinking as you were going through back to the fairs, you were going through some of these different categories. I'm like, what a great time to be out taking photos.
Sure.
If you're a photographer, now's a beautiful time. I've noticed all the dogwoods blooming and great time to be out doing that. And really you do need to be out. We don't want people congregating, but to be out in nature and trying to do some things. So I live near the Greenway. Take a walk.
Well, gardening is a great exercise.
Great
too.
exercise.
So we certainly don't want to get so lax. Couch potatoes are not where we want to go.
That's right. Lee, anything else for us today?
Not that I can think of at the moment anyway.
Thank you. I have learned a lot. I haven't asked a lot of questions today, but I should have brought a pencil and a piece of paper in here and been taking notes, so I know what to plant, but I'll have to call my friends over at Cooperative Extension or rewatch this to catch some of what you said. So thank you for being here and
my pleasure.
Taking time to join us. We really appreciate it.
Glad to.
And thank you for watching Caldwell County Today.